But yeah, right now it's a little bit of a collective effort with a few of us. I won't name any names because I don't want any of us to get those specific comments towards us. Anyway, hey, we made it through the second topic. Only took us like 20 minutes to get through that one topic. I guess now we can get into some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, I was gonna say the next thing that we're gonna talk about is game balancing relating to how stamina and damage can be better
Yes.
tuned.
Please.
Why has that been
Please
such a
help
difficult
me.
task to complete? Is there anything? Can't we just change a slider here or there, or turn something on and off and make it just an easier experience in terms of
And we all know the answer for that.
or is there something else that needs to happen?
I wish it were that easy. It would make my job a lot easier about explaining about how we handle that stuff. But I mean, I think the first thing is that so we have a vision for the game that we're making around authentic boxing, right? And we have a game that's in early access right now, which means it's not finished. And we're working on these areas. And there's some things that are just going to feel rough until we've
definitely
done things, or there's some things that we just have.
You're preaching right now.
Feedback.
You're preaching.
So I guess the first thing is when you think about balance of stamina and damage, because those are the two things that people talk a lot about. Sometimes what we hear from players is I can just throw too many punches in a game, or it's not consequential enough. My opponent was able to throw too much. They didn't pay for it. They weren't tired, or damage.
All the above.
I can't damage people enough with counters, or I can't damage
all the above
with this particular fighter that I want to utilize. And I guess the first thing is we can say we want those things to feel consequential, right? And that we know that the game that is live right now, that they maybe don't feel as consequential as we would like
at all. Really,
those are things that we're working on, but some of them require us to take a hard look at some of the systems and how the systems work, because it's not as simple as let me just change this one value. It's a thing that we have to think about, and then there's a part of this too that's well, you also go to places like PAX where it's not all the hardcore players, and then we realize, people that play our game are having a totally different experience than the folks talking to our online, or
that's straight true,
right? Some people would refer to that as a casual audience, if you will. And so I'm at PAX and I'm just we're over here worried about damage and stamina.
Everybody loves it
being too much, and then I see people just hitting the buttons and they're out of stamina in 5 seconds, and they keep hitting the buttons, not realizing they're out of stamina. So I think for us, there's a goal of our game vision is around authentic boxing, and that's what we're going to do, and that's what we're going to deliver. We also find the ways to be thoughtful about how do we make our game a little more accessible in terms of how people onboard onto that. And so in some sense right now, we actually haven't mastered that for either audience, right? We haven't, for the person that...
You make the game for the hardcore fans. You make the game for the hardcore boxer. You give information to help the casual boxer become a better player. Give them information. If you see people stand bottoming out when the casual player plays, maybe have some type of in-game tutorial about stamina management, or what happens when the bar decreases from you throwing too many punches. Things like that. Education is the best way for everyone to enjoy a game. Giving the player education around certain stuff is the best way to help the player out. You don't have to diminish the mechanics of the game to make the game more fun or more playable for a certain player group. But if you give them that information where they can find it if they want to seek that information, it will lead to them having a more enjoyable experience. Instead of somebody typing up a review, every time I throw so-and-so amount of punches, my stamina my punches become so slow, I don't know what's going on. If there's some type of tutorial, some type of in-game training saying, okay, if you throw too many punches, this will happen, this will make you more vulnerable, now you're being more susceptible to getting knocked out, it will help lessen that that learning curve, so to speak, of the game, which I think is where Undisputed should go as well, as far as in-game tutorials or in-game training. Even the content creators, I will volunteer to make tutorials on whatever they need made for whatever aspect of the game they think will be too hard for a player to understand. I would do my best to explain it with controller on screen, explain the thought process of what happens when this happens versus if you do this, the pros and the cons, what to expect. I will do all of that for certain tutorials if that is needed in game. I mean, I think that's the best way. Player education, I think, goes a long way as far as having a good community, having everybody enjoy the game. Honestly, me personally, I don't think you need to. You could probably diminish some mechanics if you really deem them too like advanced or too hard for a certain audience, but I really don't think that's the case. I think it's really more education is why some people deem stuff too hard, because they just don't know, or there's no way for them to know because the game doesn't explain it. You know what I mean? So I hope that's something they look at in the future as well.
Comes in and they hit buttons and they're out of stamina and they don't realize what's happening. We haven't landed it for that audience, and for our core audience that goes in, we haven't, mastered the consequential feeling of risk versus reward. And so, yeah, I mean, Ash, if you want to talk maybe a little bit about just like some of how we approach that, but I think people are saying it doesn't feel consequential enough or right, and it's because we have these things that we're kind of like parallel pathing in terms of how we work with different audiences of players that will play the game, and that work's just not all done yet.
Yeah, I think
fair answer. Way better answer than we feel good about where we're at. Because I feel like I never thought that's what they thought, but a lot of people in the Discord, they be getting so frustrated. It's funny sometimes reading what they say. They basically feel like sometimes like SCI is just like, yeah, this is not that bad of a spot. We're cool. But I didn't think it was that case. I just thought, it's going to take a little bit longer to get to where we want to go. But them explaining that changing the slider is not going to make much of a difference as far as damage and stuff like that goes. I realized that early on because I did a test when the right hand spam was extremely bad, even though it's very bad right now with the cross. I did a test where if they up the damage to 2x or 1.5x, and you're getting spammed, you're going to get knocked out rather than going to decision by the spam. So I can see why they don't want to just do the blanket up of the scale of the damage slider. Well, let's see what else they have to say.
There will the two audiences, whether you're casual, whether you're hardcore boxing fan. I think the game that we're creating here, has always been about you're playing the game. If you're into boxing and, if you make a mistake, then expect to get punished. The whole thing about, getting hit and, punishment. Not getting hit.
Mm-hmm.
It's
hit and don't get hit.
Part of the fabric of our game. And I think, as you've just said there, watching people pick up the controller and just, button mash for a few rounds and, still have fun and not really care about all that kind of stuff. It's for us, it's a case of really sticking to what we really care about, and that is having an authentic boxing game. So I think in terms of balancing stamina, it's always been a case of not making it like too punishing, but then there's a whole other half of an audience that would say that it's we haven't gone far enough with it, and I think that goes to the same way with damage. And things like getting knocked out from counter punches. So I think for us, audience that would say that it's we haven't gone far enough with it, and I think that
I'll tell you this much: you definitely haven't gone far enough with it. Now, do you need to go crazy 180 the other direction? Not necessarily, but where you're at now cannot be sustainable whatsoever. Like whatsoever, there's no casual player should be throwing 1,000 punches in a boxing match like this. Not at the output that is at currently. So even if you didn't want to make it too punishing for a newer player, it just cannot stay whatsoever where it's at right now. It just can't be that way. Of course, the hardcore players like myself, of course, would like heavier punishment on that. But I understand not wanting to make it too punishing for players where they just can't win. But it needs to be punishment enough where you don't want to keep doing it. If you continuously do not manage your stamina, you should lose. You should not win and not manage your stamina. Let's put it that way. If you do not manage your stamina, you should be in trouble. If you don't outright lose, you should at least be in trouble during the fight. It should be a thing where, like, if you want to have success in the match, stamina management should be a thing. Either stamina management should be a thing, or it needs to be like, I can see if you have somebody like Tommy Morrison, for example, doesn't have good stam, so you want to go out and you want to try to knock out your opponent. That's great. But if the defensive boxer is avoiding all your punches and making you whiff a lot, and you end up gassing out, it should be that way. It shouldn't, give you a buffer where it's like, well, we don't want to make it too punishing for people who use Tommy Morrison if they gas out by throwing a bunch of hooks. You know what I mean? You need to be punished for certain stuff, even if you are a newer player to a game. Any fighting game where a newer player plays an experienced player and the newer player makes continuous mistakes, they are punished. They don't just give them get out of jail free cards or make it, let's not make it too hard on a new player. The top always can destroy the lower tier player. That's how it's supposed to be. That's just how it is. A really good boxer gets in there with an inexperienced, lesser boxer, they usually destroy them. Now, do you need to make it super punishing where it's just too bad on a player to even pick up the game? No. But it needs to lean more towards the hardcore type of audience versus the casual, for sure.
That goes, to the same way with damage.
And my same thoughts apply to damage as well.
Knocked out from counter punches. So I think for us, there's a lot of changes that are coming in that space as far as stamina and damage go.
Change, I like that.
A number of iterations. We are carrying out a full review of the game as far as how the different game modes feel. At the moment, obviously with casual and simulation.
Interesting.
We want there to be a clear separation with regards to how that how our game feels. So as far as stamina usage goes, damage, we will be making some changes in the following updates, which players will be able to find the right balance for them, right? If they feel like it's too difficult for them, then there'll be things in there they'll be able to change, and vice versa. If things are too easy, then players will be able to change some of those sliders. So it is important one for us.
And some of that it's not going to be a thing that happens overnight, right? Like we're probably, going to make some changes, but I think some of the larger systemic stuff is stuff that will take time, right? So I don't think it doesn't feel to me like the sort of thing that's like, oh, yep, all of a sudden this is just a thing that's fixed. I think,
I don't expect it to be that way either.
It needs a lot of work. I do want to make sure we're clear about, like, when we think about those audiences, though, that when we think about a casual audience, it doesn't mean, like, for us, we actually think authentic boxing is fun, right? So so when we explain to people, when we're at PAX and I'm showing a player or I'm showing the media the game, like, it's not an either or thing. It's just more about how do we onboard people and on-ramp them into caring about the things that make the game authentic. So onboarding them to understand and care about the consequence of being missed. Like, why
what I talked about earlier with like the
the sort of
tutorial training type of thing for players
versus I just want to go in and hit buttons. I'm sure there's a way for people to enjoy that experience on a low difficulty setting or something like that, but we think that people actually are gonna care about the authentic boxing experience, even if they're a new player. That's a thing that people.
You love to hear that. You love to hear that.
So for us, we don't really see it as an either or thing. But right now, with where the game is at, we just don't think that. We think that both audiences, we have not mastered our ability to provide that kind of experience and ramp up to that, and that's why we need to work on it.
Yeah, and even in a microcosm in terms of how a casual player experiences the game on the different levels, like just to even the PAX kind of thing that you reference, and not to toot my own horn here, when playing against somebody, like they'll play against each other, and then every once in a while somebody would want to play against me because I'm standing there and they want to know something, they might know who I am, so they'll play with me. And they're entertained by fighting each other and just blasting at each other. But then when I'm playing against them and I'm doing all of these different intricate things and moving my head, and they're entertained by the prospect of that as well. They're like, whoa, what's going on? How are you doing that? How are you moving here? How are you moving over there? So there's like, even between
like seeing high level play,
there seems to still be an appreciation to the deeper level stuff, even if they can't get there just yet. So I think if we, focus on the authentic boxing element of it, I think it'll pull even the casual fans.
Fair point.
If we go in that direction. So I do 100% agree on that. Also, one thing about the updates, a couple of updates ago, we had a few different fighter rating changes, or almost like a sweeping change for a lot of different fighters. But we have seen there's been much less of that. So what's the plan with handling ratings moving forward?
What's the
Since
plan on that?
we did it before, are we still doing that? Are we still focusing on that?
Yeah, so I mean,
Not a focus,
I
I would
think two
assume.
updates ago we had a bunch of ratings changes. Most of them were in heavyweight, and I think the way we've thought about that is, trying to align with making the changes that matter the most, right? So heavyweight's like the most popular division in our game.
Yeah.
We did a pass on that. We opened up the Discord where people were talking about it, saying, "Hey, you guys have got a few things really wrong," and we agreed. And so we made some of those changes, and then I think this last time it was mostly about fixing Amir Khan because we had him a little out the gate, a little too powerful, a little too
just a smidge, just a smidge.
So yeah, I wanted to talk about this just mainly because I don't want people to be confused about like, hey, why would you do a bunch of ratings and then next time you got a few? I mean, I think ratings, frankly, for us is a pretty challenging thing, and part of that is just because we are a small company, right? So it's not like we've got the ratings guru who sits all the time and focuses on these things. As much as we're boxing fans, some of it is
offer myself as tribute,
a best effort, that we can get it to a place.
I offer myself as tribute,
acceptable, knowing that it's not perfect and that it's not full release shippable yet when it comes to ratings.
Right.
So what's going to happen is that over the time, as Ash talked about, there being like a full review of different areas of the game, there's going to be a point where we look at the ratings and we say, okay, this is like our real concerted pass that we're going to make to, as we've gotten a bunch
just
more
go over complete
to make sure.
Now, see, this is something I talked about as well, which is I like that they're saying this though. I felt like in regards to like the models, the ratings, maybe animations, that they would go before the game is where it needs to be as far as like the finished type of game. They would go over those things and kind of clean up certain stuff, which is that's going to be great for the game overall.
It makes sense that they honor the fighters, that the fighters really feel like they have strengths and weaknesses.
Yep. All things are
it's
important.
Just one of those things where right now it's like, again, if it's on a list of 10 things, then it kind of feels like you're not treating it as important as it is, when it's a thing that you focus on and can make it, make sure that we have a time and a process to really hone in on it. I think it'll make a difference in terms of what you see when the game is shipped. But yeah, right now it's a little bit of a collective effort with a few of us. I won't name any names because I don't want any of us to get those specific comments towards us. But
I'm looking for you.
There's things that we're going to do to improve that process and checks in order to make sure that it's not just somebody's hot take and that we feel really good about the ratings that are going to ship in the full game.
Yeah, Rocky Marciano.
Always helpful to keep dropping in those comments in Discord too, because we do look at them, and if there's something that feels like, oh, you're right, that's really egregious, then we want to handle that sooner rather than
Rocky
later.
Speed.
Yeah, perfectly said.